Welcome to the High Agency Podcast with your host, Noah Revoy.
Hello, I'm here today with Kevin Burch. He's an advanced parenting educator, and he's going to talk to us today about how we can be better parents. And even if you're not yet a parent, this is the kind of information you need to know to understand how you can prepare for the responsibilities of parenting. And something that I find a lot of clients who maybe don't currently have children benefit from when they hear about good parenting is it helps them to contextualize their own experience as children, because we were all children at one point, and to help us understand where our parents maybe didn't quite hit the mark, where they failed, where they did really well, and where we perhaps need to fix ourselves and parent ourselves to get what we missed in childhood. Thank you very much for joining me today, Kevin.
It's a great pleasure to be here. Thanks for inviting me, Noah.
Excellent, excellent. So we had some questions that we were talking about in the beginning, and I just want to let everyone know, if you want to get a hold of Kevin, there will be links below this video. And where is it that, just in case they're only listening to the audio, that they can find you?
So if they go to parenting-secrets-of-the-1%.com, and that's all words, no figures or symbols, parenting-secrets-of-the-1%.com, they can opt in and get access to my free training program for parents who want to really give their kids the best start in life, and they'll get more info from me there.
Excellent, excellent. So could you tell us a little bit about yourself, about your story? You have a very interesting backstory of how you got into this.
Yeah, thank you. Well, I think something you just said there in the introduction, which I didn't know you were going to say, but I thought was very perfect, was about how, as when we're not yet parents, learning about parenting and understanding those things can give us perspective on our own childhood. And those two things really go hand in hand, because my development as a parent and putting so much focus and attention and effort into being a great parent and healing my own stuff from my own childhood and getting my own life together, and transforming areas in my life that weren't working, all those things go together. They go hand in hand. And actually, I think for many parents and maybe even fathers more perhaps, but certainly parents generally, when we have children, it's like that then forces us to up our game, because suddenly we have a reason, we have a calling, something beyond ourselves. You know, stereotype, sitting around playing video games and eating pizza all day isn't going to cut it, right? Because we realize there's someone big relying on us big time, watching us, learning everything that what we do, right?
Yeah, you can't live like a kid when you got a kid.
Yeah, I mean, you can, but there's going to be some consequences, right? There's going to be some knock-on effects of that. So to tell my story, perhaps if I start at one of my low point, I mean, I'm now 54 years old. My low point was about 2010 when I was freshly divorced. I was £85,000 in debt, so about $110,000 of personal debt, over and above mortgages. And I was very disengaged from my work. Like, I was coaching, I was helping people. I was making a difference, but it really felt like a grind to me. And at that point, my daughter was also 7. And I realized, I needed to turn it around for her sake and for mine. And I said they go hand in hand. And that's when I really took things to another level in terms of going on courses, getting coaching and mentoring, spending time looking at my own life and myself and going deep and facing, uncomfortable truths that perhaps I'd avoided before, and taking action to transform those areas of my life and others. And so, now it's 10, 11 years on, and the debt is long gone, and I've got, big cash cushion, such that COVID, even though it affected my business, didn't really affect my life that much. And it's got the cushion behind me. I've got, stock market investments around the world. I'm happily remarried to a loving, supportive, successful, doctor, a beautiful woman, and we're a real team. Like, it's a real partnership. And she's ride or die is the phrase, right? Sometimes gets used. I don't know if you use that phrase in the States, but we're really committed to each other, which is fantastic. And that's the kind of relationship I've always wanted. And now I love what I'm doing, right? It's like, I can talk to you about parenting and the stuff that we're talking about all day and all night without running it out of enthusiasm. And then the other thing is my daughter, which obviously proof of the pudding, right? She's now 18. She saves 30%, over 30% of her income into the stock market for her long-term future. So, this is a teenager putting money away that she will not draw on for 20, 30 years, perhaps. But she's not spending it on Spotify. She doesn't have Spotify Premium, right? She doesn't have a budget for that. She puts money in the stock market instead of having Spotify Premium. So she's thinking long-term, totally different history to me, totally different future to the one I had at her age. She understands relationships really well. She's got a high degree of emotional intelligence. I have great confidence that she'll do really well and make great decisions and choices in that area. And she doesn't have a career. She just finished school, right? But she's got an offer to do maths, to study maths at one of the top 20 maths universities in the world. And she's also actually signed up with £1,000 of her own money to do a mentorship, to be mentored in real estate investing starting in September. So, that's a choice she made, and she's invested in herself. So again, very different. So the proof of the pudding, here's one I made earlier. She's doing pretty flipping well. And obviously I don't deserve all the credit for that, right? But it's her life, not mine. But I know if I'd carried on being who I was in 2010, if I carried on teaching her, like modeling and showing her that that's the way to live, and also all the kind of unconscious messages that I would have communicated to her, my belief system, etc., she would not be where she is now. Like there's no doubt about that whatsoever. So yeah, that's where we are right now. And I suppose the other, tell my story, right? Going back, how come I ended up in such a bad place in 2010? And this is the bit that sometimes shocks people. Well, my mother was 16 when I was born. She had me when she was 16. My parents got married because she was pregnant, and then they split up when I was like 12 months old. I lost all contact with my father, and then my mother got married again, and divorced again, and married again, and divorced again. So by the time I turned 18, my mother had actually been divorced 3 times. So my childhood was pretty flipping unstable in many ways. And I had a very young and inexperienced mother who was, not very confident, quite anxious, didn't really understand how any of these things work that we've been talking about. Obviously, the imprint in my head about relationships and marriage and love and what that meant was like, it means pain and disappointment and arguments and fighting and financial stress and all that stuff, right? So, I ended up getting divorced myself. What a surprise, right? But my mum's been divorced 3 times. I've only been divorced once, and I'm sticking at 1. And, my intention is that my daughter won't be divorced at all. I mean, who knows, right? But that's obviously my intention. So I can really see how my mum, I always knew my mum loved me, and I have no resentment towards her. And I can see how the kind of instability and the unpredictability of my childhood had a lot of effects on me. Like I can see how if I was designing a childhood for a kid and bringing them up to do well in life, there was a lot of things that were missing. And then I can see the knock effects. And that's, in part why I ended up where I was. And that's when I decided to turn things around. Yeah,
it's very interesting that you're mentioning that your mother, in order to get pregnant at 16, you're probably coming from a chaotic background to begin with. Or at least there's something missing where you're out seeking to start a sexual relationship, and there's no accidental pregnancy. Everyone knows how that happens. And we've taken it through taking a couple of generations to heal. And that's actually a very, very ancient idea, that it takes a few generations to heal from massive trauma. Just like it can take a few generations for a society to decay, it takes a few generations to build it back up. And that's, a lot of times people say, I want to improve my parenting, but I'm so broken. How am I going to do it? I'm not going to be able to be perfect. I've already been a bad parent for like 5, 6, 10 years. What am I going to do now? And I think you address a lot of that in your advanced parenting from what I could see. But I'd like to know what it is. What does that mean, advanced parenting?
So essentially it comes down to being proactive in what you want for your kids and taking active steps to help them get there. Because everybody wants the best for their children. If you ask 1,000 parents, would you like your kids to do better in life than you have? Everyone's going to say yes to that, right? But what are we actually doing about it? Because often people have quite limited ambitions to say, well, I want my kids. I mean, I've had family members I've talked to about this say, oh, I just wanted my kids to be nice people and, stay out of trouble with the police. And it's like, that's great, but it's kind of low bar, right?
Yeah.
And if you just, here's the thing, here's the kind of brutal, harsh reality. If you just kind of go along with what everybody else is doing and you raise your kids the way everybody else is raising them, then by definition, your kids are likely to turn out producing the results of average adults, like the results that everybody else in society is producing. And the reality is that in modern Western society, that means, 65 to 70% chance they're going to be overweight or obese, a 70+% chance that they're going to be in debt and financially stressed, and depending on the country, between like a 65 and 90% chance they're not going to like their work. they're going to be disengaged from their work and unfulfilled it. Oh, and then the 4 key pillars I talk about, of course, relationships. Well, 40% of marriages end in divorce, and of the ones that don't end in divorce, how many of those are happy and fulfilled? The people are really glad they're together. And then, of course, there's the unhappily married, and then there's the unhappily single. So if you add up the divorce, the unhappily married, and the unhappily single, again, we're in a majority, right? So if you just roll the dice and let it go to random, chances are they're going to be overweight or obese. Chances are they're going to be financially stressed in debt. Chances are they're going to be unhappily married or single, unhappily single or divorced. Chances are they're going to hate their work or not be engaged, they not really like it and be inspired by it. And there's a good chance they'll end up on all 4 of those being negative. I want my child and everybody's child to end up with all 4 of those in the positive minority. Right. So if you leave it to chance, the probability of your kid doing good results in all 4 of those is quite small. So let's be conscious of that. Let's be aware that those are where the stats are and think, right, what do I need to do as a parent to maximize the probability of my kid growing up and having an adult life where they are in the healthy, wealthy, or at least financially, comfortable, not stressed all the time by money, and they can have a great long-term relationship that really works and brings some fulfillment, and they can do some work in the world that and have some purpose in the world that means something to them.
I really like how you described it as with probability. Most people have a terrible understanding of probability. I'm sure your daughter, being into mathematics, is a whiz about this, but probability doesn't work how people think it is. They think that 50% chance of getting divorced, which means I have a 50% chance and you have a 50% chance and everyone has a 50% chance of divorce. Instead of understanding that, no, some people, because of probability, it's a distribution, and some people are going to have a near 100% chance of divorce and some people near a 0% chance of divorce. I wouldn't say there's ever such a thing as 0, but you can approach it close enough that it's not an issue for you. And they don't understand that if you just roll the dice, you usually end up in the bottom end of that. The reason being is that to get to a good place, you have to make a large series of congruent good decisions according to some sort of a plan to move you forward. And if you fail on 10 or 20%, or even one really bad decision that you make, you end up making the whole thing collapse. And so the probability that if you roll the dice, some of those decisions are going to be sufficiently catastrophic to hold you back from success is almost 100%. It's extremely rare that the parents roll the dice and the kid turns out everything just happens to roll his way. That only happens on TV.
Yeah. I mean, as well as studying all things that talks about these different areas, obviously I've studied like the parenting experts, and there are people who have families where all the kids turn out really well, all the kids are high achievers, and you're like, that's not a coincidence, right? And partly it's genetics plays a factor in our personality and how we approach things, of course, but it's also about the culture of the family. It's about the guidance of the parents, about what the parents are role modeling. It's also about the conversation the parents are having with the kids, right? Obviously, actions speak louder than words. So the number one thing is what you're demonstrating in your life. When I wanted to teach my daughter about saving and investing in the stock market and being financially intelligent and responsible, I needed to be doing it myself. It was no good teaching her one thing and then I was still, spending more money than I made and borrowing. That wasn't going to work. But it wasn't enough for me to just do it. Like, it was a factor, but I had to also communicate with her what I was doing. So things like, whenever I had a meeting with my accountant, I'd take her along at like the age of 7 and she'd just sit there. But then it's like, oh, having a meeting with your accountant is completely normal for her, right? She's not going to be intimidated by that as she grows up. When I was looking at my bank statements or dealing with my spreadsheet of my debts, whatever, I would show it to her. I would talk to her about it, say, Daddy made some really bad decisions and I used to spend more money than I made and then I borrowed it and I got myself in debt. Isn't that crazy? Oh, it's so silly. It's really difficult. Made life really difficult now. I'm sorting it out though. Have those conversations from quite an early age, and then she's mindful of what's going on, and it just seems it's the water in which she swims. It's not something she has to learn the hard way when she's in her 20s or 30s. And then of course you can actually create experiences, right? So when she was even 6, actually, before my debt got to the bottom, I started doing this because I had to wait for my divorce to go through before I could really start to sort things out. And when she was 6, we had a jam jar that we kept in her room, and I called it her magic money jar, right? So she had like £40 in this jar, And every night, some more coins appeared in the jar overnight. The money grew in the jar, right? I said, when you keep money in that jar, the money will grow. And she was like, oh, it's magic. I said, yeah, magic. And then she goes, what, can I spend the money? Can I spend it? I said, well, you can spend it, but if you spend it, there'll be less in there and it won't grow as much. And at one point she did spend some, and guess what? It then started growing more slowly, right? And so she was so excited about getting, 20 pence or 30 pence growing in her jar. Obviously, her percentage interest rate was really, really high, but it still wasn't really costing me very much, right? And the point is, it created this huge excitement in her. So she associated all these positive feelings and this excitement and enthusiasm with saving and waiting for your money to grow. And so, creating experiences like that are why now, it's not a problem for her. It's just totally normal for her to think long term.
Yeah, you were mentioning rolling the dice, but there's another kind of real toxic parenting is the manipulative parenting that uses shaming tactics to get the kid to save money. Well, if you don't do that, you're not responsible, you're a bad person, blah, 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 blah. And that, what you described is the persuasion, which is good. Manipulation is negative and persuasion is positive, because you're using positives to encourage someone to make good decisions and to have good habits. And that's extremely... You can get somewhere with manipulation, but there's a whole load of negative consequences. For example, shame around dealing with your money problems, which a lot of people have. And because of that, they never go and ask the help that they need, because you mentioned meeting with your accountant. So you weren't trying to sort this out all in your own head on your own and hide it. You were able to talk without shame to your daughter about past bad money decisions. And this ensures that she didn't end up with a load of shame around money and money decisions, so that she was able to approach it rationally. And this is a really good technique that is really underutilized by parents, is that positive approach rather than the manipulative and shaming approach. And if you do manipulate your kid, you end up with a point where it starts to work really well, but then anyone can manipulate them, because they become prone to manipulation. They become used to be manipulated, and then they go to school, and schools tend to be pretty manipulative as well if you let them, if you're a kid and you let them. And you end up as an adult, and we wonder why we have a society of people that are easily manipulated by con artists, by corrupt politicians, by corrupt churches, and it's because they grew up on a steady diet of childhood manipulation. And what you're proposing gets better results in the short term and enormously better results in the long term.
Yeah, I mean, obviously there's different parenting styles, right? But the kind of authoritarian, controlling, manipulation style backfires. I mean, anyone who achieves anything in life of value does so because it comes from inside of them. They do it because they care about it. They're internally referenced. It's something that's important to them. They don't do it because someone's standing over them with a big stick telling them they must do it, right? Most of us had jobs where that was going on. Hey, school, right? And it builds resentment, and people don't like it. And people are not their most productive. It's why, during the war, when the Germans, for example, the Nazis used slave labor or prisoner labor to manufacture armaments, guess what? They sabotaged it all. If you've seen Schindler's List, they sabotaged all the stuff. The production was terrible because you can't get people to do their best work in that way. And of course, the same applies to children. And I think that the what you said about the shame, I think that's also where we as parents sometimes, our own childhood, we've been subjected to those strategies. My mother, you talked about the cycle earlier, right? Her grandparents had a very unhappy marriage. They actually got divorced when I was about 12 years old. And my mother said, she never saw her parents be affectionate to one another. She never saw her parents. And actually, my grandfather, his father, was really brutal to him, such that my grandfather failed his exams at 11 years old on purpose to avoid the humiliation of going to this school and not being bought the uniform by his father. So this kind of cascade of negativity. And the point is, like you said earlier about someone say, I've been a crap father or a crap parent for 6 years, it's too late kind of thing. No. Because it's not about perfection. It's about building on where you are. And when my mother has sometimes been sort of heard stories of the conversations I've had with my daughter, my mum has sometimes gone, oh, I never did that with you. I couldn't do that with you. And she's like feeling guilty. I'm like, no, Mum, you broke the cycle in many ways. The conversations that you had with me compared to the conversations that your parents had with you, a different world. I am standing on your shoulders, right? I could not do this to my daughter if you hadn't given me the permission and allowed us to have these conversations about feelings and psychology and stuff in the way that we did. Because my mother trained as a psychotherapist in her 30s, right? So when I was in my late teens, and that again gave me sort of permission to look into those areas. So yeah, shame I think it's not a productive tactic. People don't do their best work when they're being shamed and they don't feel good. And then you have your kids, who don't want to talk to you and don't want to come visit you, and they stick you in a nursing home, right? It's like, oh, that's a surprise. I wonder why that was.
Yeah, and what you were doing is we're not correcting an issue in our parenting. We're actually correcting an intergenerational issue. And generally, if people were not raised ideally and they look at how their parents were raised, it was a little worse, you can sometimes follow that back as far in history as you can. In my case, I can follow it. There is certain situations I can follow back to my great-grandparents. Others that I can follow back about 10 generations. There was a massive, almost everyone in the family was murdered. And so you go back that far, and that would have left the two people that were able to survive on my father's side that ended up coming to Canada where they were safe, as during the French Revolution. They were French nobility. They were the only two ones, and everyone that they knew had been murdered. Not just their parents, their uncles, their aunts, their cousins. Every person they knew had been murdered, and the two of them were able to escape. So you end up with this intergenerational trauma, and it does take time to heal these things, and it gets you into sometimes these cycles. I think for a long time, people didn't realize they could escape. I think it's our generation, men, you're a bit older than me, about 10 years older than me. It's men our generation that are starting to fix this for our kids. And everyone's very black-pilled about the future. And I'm thinking, basically history follows the quality of parenting. And we're having a divergence, some people getting worse and a whole lot of us getting a lot better.
We live at the time of greatest freedom, individual freedom, and greatest opportunity in human history, right? I mean, look at the amount of information that we have access to. The fact that you and I are having this conversation, right, and that it's available globally, instantly. I mean, this is all unprecedented. So there's plenty of opportunity. The information, the tools are available. Also, we live in a time. There's some downsides to how kind of soft perhaps modern life is for many people. Anyway, some downsides to that. But it's also like it's not brutal in the way it was. Going back to my French Revolution, but even 100 years ago, 150, life was really flipping tough and brutal. People weren't educated. They didn't, they just repeated the same patterns. They were brutal to their kids. They were struggling to survive. There was no antibiotics. There was no refrigeration. There was no running hot water. There was no toilets that flushed indoor. Like life was tough, right? And so
even if you're a great parent, there's this huge chance that one winter you're going to get the plague and half your kids or all your kids are going to die. Yeah.
So you had to be focused on survival, and that's humans. One of the things I talk about is how one of the challenges in modern life is that our evolutionary heritage is that we are still hunter-gatherers in terms of our biology and neurology, because that's what we've been for hundreds of thousands of years. And then suddenly, very quickly, with the same genetics, we are in this incredibly modern environment, and that presents wonderful opportunities and it presents certain challenges. So if you're not equipped you don't understand that, people get very confused and get upset about human nature and how it doesn't fit with the modern world, and they have theories about how the world should be, but people don't seem to be behaving the way we think they should. And it's like, no, because they're human beings that are based on thousands of years of evolution, right? So we've got this kind of legacy, and as you say, now for those that are willing to face up to the generational trauma, willing to, because you said it takes time, and I agree it takes time, and it also takes intention.
Yes.
Because there are plenty of people who are just, I'm not going to even think about it, I'm going to keep my blinkers on and I'm going to repeat the pattern. I mean, they're not intentionally, but because it's challenging, right, to look at yourself. For me to go, do you know what, I'm $100,000 plus in debt, that's me. I've done something there I've done a lot of things there that have contributed to that. I was in a victimhood place about that at one point, where I was not only blaming my ex-wife for paying her money and blaming my mother for not teaching me about money and all this kind of stuff. I was actually blaming the banks and the credit cards for lending me the money. Now, talk about victimhood mentality. We all have it to some degree. blaming them for, I borrowed the money and I'm blaming them for lending it to me. How insane is that? So it's uncomfortable to go, do you know what? I'm being a total victim here and I'm blaming them. I'm being an idiot. And also I'm beating myself up and blaming myself and telling myself I'm a failure and all that, which doesn't work either. Let's just pause that blame game, step out of the blame and the shame and just think, okay, let's be really honest. What do I need to do to sort this out? And what can I learn to take things forward and have things work better for me? And then teach my child and children that they can do better and learn and stand on my shoulders and learn from my experience.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's that intention plus time is what gets you results. And when you go and then learn about things like taking your course, that just gets you results quicker. But the intention needs to come first. The intention needs to come first.
The intention needs to come first. And I rounded it up recently, but I spent over 1,000 hours studying courses and being coached one-to-one. And I don't know, like $40,000 on that as well, right? And if this is like my course is like the distillation of all that. And if I could have done this course, if this course existed that I've created, if it existed 10 years ago and I could have bought it, my God, it would have saved. Oh my God, it would have saved me so much time and effort and energy. But it didn't. But yeah, that's why I've done it basically.
Well, and that's a big part of why we're doing what we're doing. I will come across people who they can't understand what we're doing. They think that it's some way that we're trying to make money or profit off of it. But it has a lot more to do with the fact that we were in terrible pain. We found a way to fix it. And if you'd suddenly discovered the cure to cancer, the selfish thing would be to keep it to yourself. You got to get it out there, but getting it out there costs money. And therefore there needs to be, like, you have a lot of things you give away for free, so do I, but you need to have this in a sustainable model that can get out to people. And a lot of people, they can take the course, but they really need one-on-one coaching. And you do offer one-on-one coaching. I do
one-on-one coaching as well. So there's but I can't see everybody one-on-one, right? So I've been working for 15 years with kids and parents on their confidence primarily, and then all these different areas as well come into it as it broadens out. So yeah, I do that too. But I can't see hundreds of thousands of people like that, right? And there's more demand. And I think when you said about free and money, I mean, if somebody resents paying for a course and doesn't want to pay for a course, even though they think it would be valuable for them, that's to do with their own issues around money and the balance of fair exchange and giving and receiving. So actually, it's not just about being sustainable, that's an important part, but also if you are doing stuff for free all the time, too much, because you don't value what you're doing, you don't see the value in what you've created, you're actually teaching people that they shouldn't value themselves either. You're modeling that for them. And so one of the rules of the universe is that we live in a universe of fair exchange, so that we live in a universe of give and receive. So if somebody, and this applies in any commercial relationship, if we overpay for a loaf of bread, we pay too much for a loaf of bread, we're pissed off. We feel resentful for overpaying. If we are undercharged for a loaf of bread, we feel a bit guilty and we feel out of balance because if people get given us stuff for free all the time, we're like, no, this is too much. Let me do something back for you. If our neighbours are always bringing around cakes and meals and they won't let us reciprocate, that feels uncomfortable as well. So when there's a fair exchange, that applies in commercial relationships. Clearly, then the relationship's sustainable and it can keep going and you can serve more customers and people will buy more stuff and they're getting more value. The baker's getting money and the customers are getting loaves of bread and everyone benefits. A win-win-win. And that also applies in personal relationships, because if I'm in a relationship with my wife and she's doing all the work and she's giving and I'm just taking, she's going to get pissed off. She's going to feel resentful and it's not going to be sustainable. And I'm going to feel guilty. It's not going to work. And sometimes people doubt this. Sometimes people talk about, you should just be giving for nothing. And I say, well, okay, altruism can kind of have a little bit of a place, but not really. And I think there's a thought experiment. If you work in an office and every day you see somebody carrying a box of files along the corridor, and every day you hold the door open for that person. So you hold the door open and let them walk through the door every day at the same time. And you do that for 6 months and they never thank you. They never make eye contact with you. They never nod or smile. They never even acknowledge that you're doing this for them. How long is it going to be before you let that door slam in their face, right? You're not going to go 6. It's going to be like a few days. Like, fuck you, man. Excuse me. You're going to be like, no way, right? because there's not an exchange of something. There's not some acknowledgement in return, right? And so that applies. And this is, coming back to you say about selling your services. If you just give everything away for free, then you don't value what you're doing. You're teaching people to not value themselves, and that isn't the way the world goes round. That isn't sustainable. Nobody benefits from that, because if you don't, it's not sustainable. Services just fall apart. They have to be financed to be sustainable, as you said.
Yeah, the basic law of nature is reciprocity. It's always about reciprocity. Our relationship with each other, our relationship with nature, our relationship with our children. If it's not reciprocal, then what ends up happening is somebody checks out of that relationship. And
Absolutely.
what I've found is that my most successful clients are the ones that paid the most.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, for sure. And I think that's,
because it comes with, I feel more energized to give them the service, not because of the money so much. I'm actually not very money motivated, but because the appreciation that it shows and the dedication to solving their problems that shows indicates to me that this person is receptive to actually solving their problems. And that's this reciprocity is not, it's not just about mutual gain. It's about showing intention. It's the same reason why any organization you want to join, there's some sort of a buy-in fee. And if they say you get in for free, then the buy-in fee is like your integrity or something like that. So you have to be a little suspicious when there's no obvious buy-in.
Yeah, absolutely. I've learned that, as I put my prices up many years ago, that people started getting more value out of it because I bring more to the table. Like, I'm more focused. I've better finance. I've got better equipment. I've got better training. I've got more time. I'm less stressed about other things in my life because I can deal with them financially, whatever. And the client is committed. They're all in. This is why I have my clients pay me in advance for coaching, right? They pay in advance in block because then they're going to turn up, both physically, literally turn up, and also they're going to turn up emotionally because they're all in, right? You don't want clients that have got one foot out the door, hesitating, all that kind of stuff. It doesn't, they're not great to work with, and they don't get the benefits. So yeah,
absolutely. No, what are so we've talked about some of the benefits for the parents and the children of using your advanced parenting techniques. And we talked also about how even though you weren't parented in that way, you actually went and took the time to research it. You talked about the investment you made in time and in energy and in money, and you went and did the hard legwork that you can now save people having to do that. Why do you think, though, that the parenting skills that you developed, you went out and did that? Why are more parents not doing that? Why isn't this a common thing? We understand how beneficial it is, both to the parent and the child. We understand how, kids that were properly parented, they earn more, they manage their money better, they're healthier, all of these things. It's a huge deal. We're getting vaccines promoted for some very minuscule chance of death. Meanwhile, obesity is killing half of the population. It has a lot to do with patterns set in childhood. Nobody's really saying, hey, maybe better parenting is going to fix the biggest health problems that society's facing today, and the biggest mental health problems and the biggest financial problems. Why isn't it more common? Why is it's so unusual that people really take that kind of investment as you did, and as I did as well, into becoming better parents?
Because it requires you to be proactive and take responsibility and take ownership of the outcome. And it's human nature to want somebody else to do it and to want a simple solution. This is why people go to the doctor and they want a pill, right? And, so if someone's diagnosed with, someone's overweight, type 2 diabetes, etc., age maybe 50 years old, I mean, it's incredibly common scenario today. They go to the doctor says, oh yeah, take metformin, take this tablet, take this, and, it does what it does, right? Whereas, and my wife's a family physician, right? So she has these conversations, but she has to be selective about who she bothers having the conversation with, because a lot of people aren't really open to it. But for those who are open to it, she'll be like, no, change, reduce your carbohydrate intake, don't eat any calories for 16 hours a day, just, do time restricted eating, intermittent fasting, etc. And they can reverse their type 2 diabetes. But it's not the same as, oh, just give me a tablet. I've got to think about it. I've got to change my habits. I've got to actually do something. And I think all of us have this in us. I said earlier about a victim of mentality. It's not, it's something that gets an accusation that gets slung around on social media with some justification. But it's part of the human condition to want to just blame other people and beat yourself up and kind of go, oh, I'm rubbish, I'm no good. Oh, you're really bad, but I'm no good. It tends to go together, the two sides of the coin. To go into that blame game and then just kind of, oh, do you know what? I'm going to get a tub of Ben and Jerry's, and I'm going to put Netflix on, and I'm going to take the duvet down and lie on the sofa, and I haven't got to do anything, right? And it's that passivity. And of course, it's a very short-term way of thinking, because while you're doing that, your whole life's turning to shit. But it's tempting in the short term. And I think that comes on to something else, actually, which I'm thinking of just saying is, human beings are hardwired to think short term. And again, it goes back to our ancestral heritage, because when you're a hunter-gatherer, you are literally taking all your possessions on your back. You need to be able to move everything you own. So you can't build up reserves. You can't even store grain. Literally everything has to be carried on your back. So you're necessarily thinking quite short term. Now, when we became agriculturalists, then of course we started to think more long term, because you've got to start thinking about the seasons and the harvest and storing grain for the winter, that kind of stuff, which is more long term. We can do it, but that was only 12,000 years ago. It's not very long. So we're still hardwired to be quite short term in our thinking, which in a survival situation of living in the jungle or being in a war zone, being in Syria today or whatever, that short term kind of, I've just got to get through the next 48 hours, that is of value. But we're not living in a survival situation. We're living in time of abundance and plenty, and that's when we've got all the, we've got Netflix and Ben and Jerry's. And if we have this kind of instant gratification mentality, it causes a lot of problems. So I think that's part of it. It's like, if you just want to get kids to survive, you can just kind of do that, but then the results are going to be suboptimal, should we say?
Yeah, it's time preference, and the fact that we get a result like 20 years after we apply the cure makes it very hard to see that. I work with people and we're talking about changing their diet. I'm not specifically a diet coach, but if it's really bad, I'll either get them to get a proper diet coach, or I'll just give them some basics. And I'm like, you got to stick with this new diet for at least a month to see if there's difference, it changes. You can't, they're like, oh, I've been eating well for 3 days. I don't feel any better. I cut out carbohydrates for 3 days and I feel worse. Well, yeah, because you're addicted to carbohydrates and these are withdrawal symptoms. And it's very hard for people to see. They're seeing like 24 hours ahead, not really years ahead, decades ahead. And raising children is a really long-term project. So being able to think that far ahead isn't the possession of everyone. And
it's something you can be trained to. And actually, of the 5 modules of my program, the 5th module is about teaching your kids to delay gratification. Yeah. So obviously my daughter and the money jar I talked about is one example of that. There's a million and one other things you can do, because that life skill of delaying gratification is associated with better outcomes in health, finance, relationships, exams, career, less likely to go to prison, be addicted, all those different things. And to some extent it's genetic, like kids vary, but also it can be taught as a skill. And also it's conditioned by how much the child learns to trust the future. Because if I'm in a situation where people make me promises and those promises aren't kept, then why would I give up the immediate payoff today for something in the future, which may not actually happen? Whereas if I know, actually, dad has promised me this, dad's promised me if I wait a month, he'll give me $50, and I waited a month and he did give me $50. Okay, yeah, I can wait. I learned that the long-term payoff does happen. And so my childhood living in that huge uncertainty with promises broken, relationships broken, these are your new family, and getting to know these people, and then suddenly they're gone, all that stuff. Of course, it conditioned me to think very short term, which is a big part of why I had all the problems in my 20s and even my 30s. So that's one of the teaching delayed gratification, how to do that is one of the core life skills that maps across everything, in my view.
Yeah, you mentioned the confluence of genetics and training. And so you'll often see people will say, well, that individual, that athlete, well, he's genetically gifted. And if you're a pro athlete, that's true. You are genetically gifted. No matter how much I train, I'm a pretty fit person, but I wouldn't be able to compete with people in the top of the Olympics, for example, at any point in my life, even when I was younger. And I got pretty close. I got about 95% of the way there. That last 5% was I would never make it because of genetic issues. I'm not as at that level. Now that doesn't mean that I should be weak and obese, because I can't train to that level. I won't train at all. And I think when people hear about genetics, and how it influences behavior, they think, unless I have optimum genetics, I'll never be successful. Unless I was born with 150 IQ, I'll never be successful. And it's an issue of take whatever you have and maximize your potential with what you've got in your genetics, and you'll be ahead of most people.
Of course. I mean, it's almost like laughably obvious, isn't it, that, the people, the wealthiest people in the world are not the people with the highest IQ, right? It's like, yeah, that may be a factor, but other traits, other personality traits that may be genetic, conscientiousness and extroversion, these things again have some genetic element to them. But you've got the hand you've been dealt, so flip and play the hand as well as possible. Don't just go, oh, I'm going to fold, I've got a crap hand, I'm going to fold. No, play the hand well, and you're going to do a lot better than if you just fold. You may have this range, your range in which you can get results may not be include this bit up there. So what? So therefore you want to stay at the bottom? It's again, it's the kind of, I want to sit on watch Netflix with a tub of ice cream. It's easy, right? It's the easy option in the short term. So again, it comes back to that willing to experience some discomfort now and invest for the future, which we're not really wired for.
One of the men in my local men's group, we're exercising, and this is really the first time he's gotten in good shape in his life. And he was saying to me, when does this get easier? And I said, it doesn't. You just get stronger.
Yeah,
I said, actually, this is as easy as it'll ever get, because as soon as you get fitter, we're turning up the heat,
Yeah. Well, that's what
that mentality will take you a lot farther in life than looking for the easy way out. Someone tweeted recently, I saw a great tweet that was, men who seek the easy way out have missed the entire point of what it means to be a man.
I saw that too. Maybe you wrote that or you copied it or something, or wrote tweeted it. Yeah, absolutely. In the sense of manhood. And, you are, I do CrossFit, right? And obviously when you start doing it, like when you haven't been for a while, I had a couple of weeks off recently sick. And when I went back, it was like, wow, feel the pain more. But it doesn't get easier because the next week I'm doing heavier weights. I'm running faster. And it's like, it is painful. But it's like we're so addicted in modern society to wanting there to be no pain, wanting everything to be easy, wanting everything to be convenient. Obviously, we've got all these appliances and, we can go to the supermarket and buy foods. Someone once said that we are wealthier than Louis XIV. Whoever, you know more than me about that. Whoever was who built Versailles, we're wealthier than him because he didn't have EasyJet and a flush toilet, and he didn't have all the foods available in the restaurants of downtown London. He didn't have access to Netflix and antibiotics. He
couldn't get tropical fruits flown in from the other side of the world fresh.
Yeah, exactly. These things this is like beyond his imagination. So he had more status. He had very high status, and obviously that human beings are, again, hardwired to care about status to some degree, but in any objective, measurable way, we're so much wealthier. So we've got this amazing convenience, and we want everything to be easy and convenient, and it's a trap. It's a trap because it actually just makes you weak, and the results that you get for others in your life, go down.
There's an interesting thing comparing. Few seek ease. The people that have higher status right now are the people that intentionally seek out hard things. If you look at, say, Elon Musk intentionally seeking out, taking big risks, taking hard things. If you look at, to gain status today, if you're a man and you're not unfit, people look at you differently. And the reason they look at you differently is not because you are physically appearing different. That's a sign of the fact that you are willing to do really hard things on a regular basis for multiple years. And people know that if you're willing to do that, that means you have a certain type of personality. And so you get a different kind of status in society. And really the way to get status, a lot of times, there is unearned status. There is an attempt through mass marketing to create status that has nothing to do with merit. But historically, you gain status largely because you were willing to go out and do, or maybe your ancestors were, in the case of kings and queens often, going out and do hard things that other people weren't willing to do.
I agree with you. And I also think that I wish, I don't think it's quite as true as I wish it were, because I think actually like Naval Ravikant, I don't know if you call him billionaire, venture capitalist, and he talks about how you can play a lot of people want to play status games, and status games are win-lose, right? So sport is a win-lose game because there's only one gold medal, for example, and there's nothing wrong with that. But hierarchies of status tend to be, from the top to the bottom, and if you want to move up, someone else has to move down, right? Whereas things like wealth creation and love and relationships and friendship and fitness are win-win games. Like, just because I get better at making money doesn't, despite what the communists seem to think, doesn't mean that somebody else has got poorer, right? It's the opposite. Look at how much wealth we're just talking about, how much wealthier the world is now than in Louis XIV's time. Everybody pretty much in the flipping world is wealthier than then, because the amount of wealth has gone up massively. So just because Jeff Bezos is making money and going out into space doesn't mean that he's taking it off all the poor people, though you will see that narrative online, this week with his rocket launch. But people are playing people who, what Naval said, people who aren't good at playing those the games of wealth creation, for example, will instead play the status game of knocking the wealth creators. So they knock Bezos, they knock Musk, whoever it is, they slag those people off, and amongst the kind of the losers almost, they gain status. They don't gain financial wealth, they don't gain fitness, they don't gain any of those valuable things that you're talking about, but they gain some kind of status. But it's like it's like a loser status. So they don't
want to climb the hierarchy of gold. They want to climb the hierarchy of horseshit.
Exactly. But there's a whole. Well, some people do make money out of that, of course, right? Certain politicians, etc. will get. But there's a whole ecosystem of people playing that victimhood card, blaming other people, complaining about the rich, blaming guys for being guys, blaming men for, saying, oh, gym bros are really bad for the environment, or gym bros are toxic masculinity, all this kind of stuff. You're fit, you've got a six pack, you're toxic masculinity. It's like, what? So they'll blame, and it's a way of kind of getting status within their community. But of course, it's a dead end. Yeah. So, do we want to get status? I think, again, we're hardwired for status because in our evolutionary past, it's about, mating opportunities, access to the best food, all that kind of stuff. But do we want to get it in this kind of, slagging other people, cutting down the tall poppies way, or do we want to get it in a really growth, sustainable way, the pyramid of gold, as you put it? For sure, that's better.
Yeah, and there's a kind of status from tearing people down and a kind of status from building people up. And literally, that is the job of a coach, someone like you, someone like me, is building people up and adding value to the world. And I think it's hard for some people to understand how speaking and writing and reasoning with people adds value to the world when they haven't experienced it themselves. And so you'll sometimes get this thing that, it's coaching is a scam, or they're just trying to scam people or something like that. And this is a fundamental issue with the person not understanding how we add value to other people into their lives. And like you said, it took you thousands of hours and I think you said 40,000 pounds of coaching and courses and services to learn the knowledge that you have now. And someone can access that in a couple of hours for a relatively small amount of money. And it almost seems unfair that they can do that, that they don't have to go and do all that hard work to get there. And instead of saying it's a scam, it's the deal, literally the deal of a lifetime. If all these benefits we talked about for someone's children, if you can get those benefits from your kids with a few hours of coaching, you'd be a fool not to. It is really a deal.
Just think about if your child grows up and they do what most kids do, which they go out and get themselves in debt, and then they struggle financially, and then when they're 25 or 30, they come and knock on your door. Oh, mum, dad, I'm broke. Can you help me out? Can I sleep on the sofa? Can you buy me a car? Can you help me with a deposit to buy a house? That's going to cost you a lot of money, right? As well as the pain and the emotion and and you're going to feel bad and your kid's going to be suffering. But it's just pure finances. It's like they're coming to the bank and mum and dad, and you're like, oh my God, it's going to cost you a fortune. So, but again, that's in the future, right? So many people would say, oh, well, I'm not worried about spending $20,000 in the future. If I could save $500 now, that's okay. It's like, no. Think a bit more long term. Just get connected with what that reality might be like.
Well, I do a lot of relationship coaching, and I help a lot of couples to save their marriage, basically. And what I tell them is it's a lot cheaper to get a bit of coaching, save your marriage, than it is to get a divorce. And what's interesting is I occasionally have people that say, I agree, that's true, but they don't say it in this many words, but I'm going to wait till I'm closer to the point where it's of no return in the divorce before I come back and get more coaching. And it's, even though they recognize it, they want to get closer to danger before they decide to turn around. That's a very human thing. You know, I've been camping with friends and the fire gets a little out of the fire and it's starting to burn closer to them. I'm like, you need to put that out and move your sleeping bag. Nah, that's fine. They hasn't started my feet on fire yet. And that's an extremely human thing.
They need the pain to be like higher before they go, okay, now I act. And I think that's so true. Hey, I hold my hand up for that. Do you know what I mean? It's like the pain, looking back, so many things I could have done sooner, coulda, shoulda, woulda in my life, right? Obvious. So obvious now. With the hindsight I have now, it's obvious things I could have done differently. But I wouldn't have the wisdom that I have now if I hadn't made those mistakes, right? So it's all perfect when it comes out. But it's the willingness to do something a bit more proactively rather than to being forced. Yeah, it's a very as you say, it's a very human thing that we tend to do that.
And I think raising your parents using these kind of advanced parenting techniques that you have is one of the big advantages is that your kid doesn't get stuck in that cycle of short time preference. They start to understand about and have a desire to plan ahead, to think ahead. And really, a society of people who live for the moment can't sustain an advanced civilization, because everything in an advanced civilization is about investing in the long-term future. Yeah. And we're slipping into that kind of society. You know, we got power outages in large portions of the U.S. Off and on all the time. We have issues with gas and oil pipelines where they didn't even have anyone trained in maintenance to go and manually open switches because those guys all retired 20 years ago. All they got now is guys that can press buttons on a screen and it should do something, right? You know, and if it doesn't, there's no one that knows how to go and turn a wrench to go out there and fix it. We're going to see a lot more of that as we have this shift in society. We hit that bottom. You know, you mentioned this before. You with your finances, you hit a bottom and then went up. Almost everything is like that. You hit a bottom and go up. And we're not quite at the bottom yet in society, but we can help our kids get a head start on that bounce. You know, we can start to set apart. A lot of people don't realize the Renaissance came after one of Europe's darkest times. There was plagues. There was a large portion of the population died. There was war and internal strife. And out of that came a massive flourishing of art and literature and science and technology and industry and economy. And that came really out of a very small portion of Europe. That wasn't everywhere all at once. That was maybe 10,000 people were actually involved in the Renaissance overall, many of them who will never know their names. And there's only a few families backing it. And we can very easily have another Renaissance in society if we are raising children that are capable of being a part of that. We don't need to fix everyone. We need to work and focus on our own kids and our own families. And then that is like ripples in a pond. It goes out into the world.
Absolutely. And so when we do this, when we're proactive, we're willing to ask some difficult questions and take action and face up to uncomfortable truths, it transforms our lives, it transforms the future of our children. And then there's the ripple effects of who they go on to become. Not down the generations, like our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, right? What I'm doing with my daughter is a gift to them. That's how I see it. That's certainly my intention. But yeah, she will be a beacon. You know, and as a parent herself, as a parent herself, you will become a beacon for other people. You inspire other people you don't even know they're inspired by you. They're looking at you going, wow, he's amazing. He does that on their thing. And you don't even know about it half the time, right? So absolutely, the ripple effect is huge.
Thank you so much, Kevin. We're at the top of the hour now, so I'm going to play the outro. It's great having you speak with us today. People can find you at the links that are down below in this video, or you could rewind to the beginning and listen to the first couple of minutes where Kevin talks about his website's address. Thank you very much for having you on, and I'd love to speak with you sometime in the future where we can all get together physically when travel has been restored.
That would be great. Look forward to it.
Excellent. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks so much. Bye-bye. Bye-bye.
Thank you for watching our video, and I hope it inspired you to take action in your life. Please subscribe to our channel and like this video to get more agency building content. The real secret sauce is in our newsletter. Click on the link in the video description below to sign up. I promise I won't flood your inbox, and anything that we do send you will be of high value.